then for me, the thing that gets really difficult to figure out is like how many of these people are real. Like, do you buy the dead internet theory? You know, the like at least 50%, 60% plus of the accounts online are all fake. Like, how much of the pylons and these things do you think are actually real people?
I think they are real people. Like, obviously there's bots, there's fake accounts, but mostly fake accounts ultimately are real people, right? In the sense that there's people who have multiple accounts, whatever, professors who don't want to blemish their academic reputation. I mean, I see economists doing that all the time, like, or you get a feel for that is the case. I mean, it's still real people. The problem often is people who are, especially the more militant ones and the ones that are more outspoken, are often very vocal minorities. So sometimes the mistake is thinking that these people are representative of more widespread feelings. For example, I mean, say anti-vaxxers that has gotten so much attention and are so vocal on social media of all sorts. So if you basically consider Facebook or Twitter as a reliable indication of public sentiment, you think that the majority of the population is against vaccines, which is not at all the case. I mean, the anti-vax community is a relatively small community. Around 20% of people in Western countries support that, but it is an extremely militant community. But then also more majoritarian opinions will always have a kind of vanguard to them. There is a smaller group of people that is far more mobilized, far more cohesive, far more determined, and that is what is manifested in the form of the online mob. Now, for me, for many, the very existence of mobs or crowds of any kind is something dangerous, something negative. And obviously, it's sometimes they're not nice crowds. Crowds can be quite bad and actually can be contagious in terms of following by example. People get so heated that they say things they wouldn't perhaps say if they were by themselves. They get even more disinhibition than social media disinhibition alone would allow for. But, that's politics. I mean, politics is conflict. It's conflict of idea. I'm much more worried about liberal attempts to kind of sanitize social media conversations. Liberals in a European sense, like centrist attempts to kind of sanitize social media conversations, turning them into whatever buttoned up conversations where I say my thing. Mr. Bourgeois 1 says something, Mr. Bourgeois 2, and everyone is basically super elegant and whatever, because that is not how society operates, and that is not how democracy operates. We want ordinary people to participate in politics. And that is actually the great thing about social media, because it is the first time in history that when ordinary people are writing their thoughts in public, not only speaking in public, they are writing in public, often with spelling mistakes, often with very strange sentence construction. But it is beautiful in and of itself, I think, like the fact that ordinary people now, many of them are kind of expressing themselves on social media. For how much often the content may not be one that is agreeable or even beyond that, but it is potentially something democratic, something that actually enriches our democracy.
I hadn't quite thought about it like that. That's a really, really beautiful way of thinking about it. I mean, I'm very much like I'd put myself in the category of like a free speech absolutist. Like I think people should be like, short of like literally inciting, like we're gonna get him, like go beat this guy up. Like aside from like literally inciting violence, I'm very much a fan of letting people say what they want. But that's a really interesting way of thinking about it. Is that perhaps that like the chattering classes or however you want to define them have never been exposed to the fact that the whole world, like everyone has some crazy opinion somewhere about something. Like I guarantee almost everyone has an out of the norm opinion about something. And like maybe this is maybe we're just not used to being confronted with like the madness of each other, and that's where that desire to shut it down comes from.
And if you use YouTube, you start from a kind of extravagant opinion you have, and then suddenly UFOs, do they exist? And then suddenly you go down the rabbit hole all the way down, right? Until you reemerge as an alt-right support or something like that.
No, you come out thinking space is fake, man. Like you,
yeah.
You end up on those Hollow Earth videos.
I mean, Hannah Arendt, the political philosopher, she had this line where she said that society's survival is premised on hypocrisy.
That's great.
In the sense that if we constantly said everything we thought about other people, like society would turn into kind of civil war, even our families or everything. I mean, there are things that we keep for ourselves because it is not kind or it is not necessary. Ultimately, living with other people also entails, in a way, kind of keeping things for yourself. So, I mean, that is why also total transparency is not good necessarily, because people need to have their interiority and they need to decide what they want to exteriorize, what is part of the internal thinking that what they want to express. Otherwise, people wouldn't even be able to consider things for themselves, and perhaps at some point have an extravagant opinion, and then whatever, also confronted with the reality and decide they don't want to have this opinion. So there is a bit of that. And there is also a bit, all the cancel culture, big, like, I would say, obsession, right, of right-wing commentators and some neoliberal commentators who are now even setting up universities because they're saying that social justice warriors are censoring them. I mean, it is not true, yet sometimes there is a bit of a tendency to single out people for punctual opinions. There is a certain moralism, a certain online moralism or puritanism, which is sometimes, I mean, I don't think it is dangerous for freedom of expression or anything. Sometimes it's a bit fastidious in a sense. It's not something that militates in favor of having kind of open conversations and having critical thought, and also allowing people to have heretical ideas, because sometimes heresies become the new orthodoxy, right? Because perhaps they do make sense.
Yeah, I mean, I think that sort of cancel at least in America, I think what happens is there are examples where like I mean, I spoke to Dr. Brett Weinstein on this show a while back, and like what happened to him was horrifying, and it was like it's like an incident where that sort of madness of the internet has spilled over into the real world, and I think and then for what happens is it's very easy for those crowds to then appear and things to sort of run out of control, and then professors who have for decades perhaps in a lot of cases been just they've been able to sort of have discussions about controversial topics within their classroom and have that just that's what university was for, essentially, in some ways, I think, and that then when that has spilled over and the internet has realized that that's what's happened, then people get very crazy and that sort of puritanism comes out, and I think that's probably what ends up happening. So you talked there that Hannah Arendt quote. I am going to have to go and find that as well. That sounds horrifying as well. It's very, very real. Society like needs hypocrisy, and maybe like, because if we were all exposed to all the things we thought all the time, society would collapse. And it's like, is that what we're seeing now with the internet? Like, is
Yeah. Yeah, there is so much animosity going on online. I think there is this polarity, especially when it comes to micro celebrities, where either someone becomes a kind of cult figure and becomes someone who attracts a fandom base, that at that point doesn't even question the micro celebrity anymore, because it's like questioning whatever your favorite reggaeton rapper or something. I mean, it makes no sense. You just admire that person, you love that person. It's really about kind of loving or hating. Like, conversely, with hating people, there are sympathizers and antipathizers. And sometimes people have more antipathizers than they have sympathizers. And there is also like an element of spite sometimes, or envy, which is a sort of side product of all this constant self-promotion and exposure that people are compelled to do, which often positions people who are not able actually to enjoy that lifestyle or to have that success in a position where they feel almost victimized by the people who instead parade their success. So it gets sometimes quite out of control because of this distance. Because there are things that people would never say to someone straight in the face of the person if they were in the same room. Also because if you do that in physical life, sometimes it can end up with blows,
yeah.
especially in Britain on Friday nights. It's not like in Italy. In Italy, we have more complex interactions. You start like insulting all the family the way down to your ancestors, and then perhaps there are some punches are blown.
Yeah, but
while with the
Italians
distance,
have the hands out long before there's
exactly,
any punches, right?
Yeah. It's more of a rhetorical violence, and then it's better, less wounds, less people hospitalized. But then there is instead this. What would you say? I mean, when you're online, instead there is this distance that make people feel safe and comfortable to say things against anyone. But those things stick. I mean, because they're not just words. Words are things. Words ultimately are material. Right? They get crystallized in people's brains, in people's memories. And then perhaps you end up meeting that person. So it can make for a very divisive trend. And throughout my research, looking at election campaigns, heard of brothers and sisters not speaking to one another anymore because they saw on Facebook that someone was supporting a candidate and the other one was supporting another candidate, and that they were completely dissing people who were for the other position. So is this really mixing of the private and the public? Right? The sentence can be quite explosive.
Thanks for making it all the way to the end of the video. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and leave a comment for us in the comments below. Let me know what you thought and if you'd like to see more of this from the show. Thank you, and we'll see you again next time.